Welcome back, everybody, to our final lesson on non-fatal offences for the criminal law. This lesson is going to focus on the most severe of the non-fatal offences, at least in this ladder from assault and battery at the common law all the way up to this offence, which is GBH with intent. Now, as I've said, this is the final lesson on the non-fatal offences. We'll spend some time looking at GBH, which is again found in, GBH with intent, which is again found in the Offences Against the Person Act. And as I mentioned in the previous lesson, what we're going to do after this is go and look at dishonesty offences. So start to look at theft and fraud, look at things like making off without payment, robbery, burglary, etc., etc. And then the final topic will look at defences to these crimes, talking about the defence of necessity, or necessity defences, should I say, as well as capacity defences, so things like intoxication and insanity, for example. I was incorrect in the previous lesson, because I said that when we look at the ladder of non-fatal offences, the more severe you go, the lower in terms of number of provisions we go in the Offences Against the Person Act. I noted that the least severe Offence Against the Person Act provision offence was Section 47 as assault occasioning actual bodily harm, and then you go to Section 20, which is GBH, and then I said Section 19, which is GBH with intent. In fact, it is Section 18. So my point was still correct, but the provision was one away. So I apologise for that, and here is the actual provision itself. This is the name of the offence: shooting or attempting to shoot or wounding with intent to do grievous bodily harm. It says here that whoever shall unlawfully and maliciously by means whatsoever wound or cause any grievous bodily harm to any person with intent to do some grievous bodily harm to any person, or with intent to resist or prevent the lawful apprehension of or detainer of any person, shall be guilty of a felony and be convicted thereof, and be liable to be kept in penal servitude for life. This is as the law is prescribed. In fact, a life sentence can be handed down for those who commit grievous bodily harm with intent. Now, the intent element does still exist in grievous bodily harm in Section 20. But the point in that is that the intent is not necessarily an intent to commit grievous bodily harm in Section 20. It is an intent to cause some force, some harm against a person. And that it is the actus reus that then rises to the level of GBH on the basis of the kind of harm that was caused. When we talk about Section 18, however, not only do you have to commit grievous bodily harm, but you have to do so with intent to commit grievous bodily harm. So there is an actus reus element. This is the unlawful wounding or causing unlawfully GBH to the victim. And then there is a mens rea element, i.e. an intent to cause GBH, or to foresee some kind of harm that would amount to GBH, or is resisting lawful arrest, which is sort of a thing that is tagged on at the end of Section 18, which has always confused me, but is a point that is still relevant. So the issue that we have, really, is the issue with mens rea, because it's a little bit complex in terms of the wording, and the provisions aren't particularly helpful in unpacking this wording. Fundamentally, where there is an intention to cause GBH, this necessarily relies on the foreseeability of harm. Necessarily, okay? However, foreseeability is noted to be a key requirement in the second element, i.e. the resisting of an unlawful arrest. If we go back here, we see here that to do some grievous bodily harm to any person, or with intent to resist or prevent unlawful apprehension or detainer of any person. Then it goes on to the rest of the provisions. So this is a key requirement there. And it is quite interesting that this is a little element that is situated in this particular piece of legislation. But that's fundamentally the beginnings and ends of GBH with intent. The additional element that is required is an intent to do some grievous bodily harm to any person. Note that this is distinctive to Section 20, which is just an intent to cause harm, an intent to maliciously cause harm. They maliciously do so, but this intent to do some grievous bodily harm is what delineates Section 18 from Section 20, and in fact changes quite significantly the sentencing. The sentencing for GBH, normal GBH, could be up to a life sentence or near to a life sentence, but when we talk about Section 18, they shall be kept in penal servitude for life. It requires a life sentence. Interesting point of reference here to note. And then finally, like I said, there is an actus reus element. The actus reus is the same in terms of what constitutes GBH between Section 20 and Section 18. It is the wounding, which is, of course, as we know from the case of Eisenhower in the 1980s, requires there to be a breaking of the skin. And then there is also a number of things that could constitute the inflicting of GBH, i.e., the inflicting of serious harm. We noted in the previous lesson that the CPS has a number of guidelines in relation to this particular point, including things like breaking bones, permanent disfigurement, permanent disability, etc., etc. And then we finally finished on looking at the case of Burstow, which argued that psychiatric harm, if it meets the level of severity, could also constitute a GBH.